Welcome back to R-rated films.
Today we're doing devil movies,
Yeah.
as I call them. 3 movies in the horror genre. Rosemary's Baby, in chronological order. Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and The Omen. These are 3 of our favorite movies
Yeah.
in this genre. And they're also, I think, 3 of the heaviest hitters in terms of film direction.
Yeah. Yeah, these are like the most formative. So they're devil slash like demonic movies, because technically The Exorcist. But yeah, they're like, what would you call it? Like Satanic Panic? Was that the?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that was a term that was used.
Mm-hmm. A lot of like lore kind of wrapped around these movies with like, you know, curses on set. You know, Roman Polanski, obviously, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like darkness surrounding these movies in general, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
Beyond what's just on the screen. So fascinating films. I'm sure you've heard of them before. Hopefully you've watched them all. If not,
Yeah,
it really doesn't
really.
matter because we're going to spoil them for you right now. But watch them. Just go ahead and watch them.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are like Polanski, one of the best directors. Well, I can't say that actually. I'm not a huge Polanski fan overall. I mean,
I've only seen Rosemary's Baby, but I
Yeah.
think Rosemary's Baby is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
That being said, I haven't jumped into any of his other movies, and I don't even know what they are. So
Yeah.
I haven't done my Polanski research.
Chinatown and like The Pianist are the only
Okay.
ones I know of.
All right, I mean,
Which-
those are massive, massive movies. Which one won an Oscar? Either of them?
Chinatown, I think.
Did it? Okay.
For probably Jack Nicholson. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe for screenplay. I really don't know. All I know is Polanski is super renowned.
Yeah.
William Friedkin with The Exorcist is, I mean, one of my favorites.
Yeah, we're big Friedkin fans here.
yeah.
I mean, he's only got a couple of really good movies, but
Mhm.
his couple of really good movies are really, really good.
Yeah, this is definitely, The Exorcist is one of them.
Yeah.
And Richard Donner with The Omen, who, he's not a household name, but he's done a lot of household name movies.
I mean, didn't we just do a Richard Donner?
Lethal Weapon.
Oh, I guess
Directed
not, okay.
The Goonies.
No, it's Lethal Weapon I was thinking of.
Hmm.
Anyway, yeah.
But yeah, The Goonies, Superman, Lethal Weapon, The Omen.
Some excellent studio
Ladybug.
films, and I mean, I think the Omen out of these 3 movies is the most studio film, even in terms of the way the plot is written and plays out.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And direction, and in score, and a lot of aspects of the movie.
And
are
having like a
played
classic,
Richard Donner,
a classic movie star with Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck, yeah. Although he is the only big star in that movie, yeah. Isn't he?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so do we want to jump into why we picked these movies, or do you have like more on why we selected them, other than what we've gone through already?
They're just great movies. I mean, you really can't think of the horror genre, especially this level of it, without comparing them. They're all tentpole movies. They're all completely different movies with
Yeah, for
completely
sure.
different directors. You've got William. I mean, I already touched on Friedkin. He's a wild man, very like American. I've always thought like if Rosemary's Baby is just a massive poem, then The Exorcist is a punk song. Like it's all. The whole movie, it's just so frenetic, and we've talked about this ever since I first saw this movie, which was only less than a year ago now. But
What?
even from the
Rosemary's
Exorcist,
Baby?
The Exorcist,
You only saw The Exorcist a year ago?
for the first time.
I didn't
a year
realize
ago.
that.
Yeah, I watched
Okay.
it with you for the first time on Halloween 2020. Yeah,
What the hell?
yeah, but even from just the opening of The Exorcist,
Why did I not
it's
realize that was the
so-
first time you saw it? Okay, all right,
Yeah.
interesting.
It's so frenetic.
Yeah.
We talked about the frame rate and how, like, I don't know what the frame rate is. It feels like it's a higher frame rate because it has this very unsettling quality, and then obviously the music. William Friedkin, total like madman, constantly keeping the movie just like entertaining no matter what. Even if sometimes plot-wise things aren't really tied up, he's just like, fuck it, we're gonna move on to the next scene. You have to figure out what happened in between.
Yeah, which is cool for
Yourself.
storytelling.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then Polanski with Rosemary's Baby, very like poetic, very European, like I always want to say that movie's like really airy, and it feels like even though Rosemary is really trapped, like the filmmaking is so like flowy and free and dreamlike.
And you say it has a flow and also a glow. There's a very kind of the sheen to it. It's a glow. What word am I looking for to describe that? Yeah, it's just got a glow, like a dreamy glow to it.
Yeah.
And not even visually in terms of the music and settings.
You're saying not visually. Wait, what do you mean?
Not just visually.
Oh yeah. The way the music. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Like it starts with the dreamy lullaby, which we've talked about before. Anyway, yeah. So Polanski and then Donner, which we already. I feel like we kind of circled the wagons on all this already.
Yeah, and we can kind of go into Donner a little bit more when we talk about the Omen, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, but these movies, I mean, tentpole movies. That's really all there is to it. Made perfectly. Overlapping themes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really can't think of horror and not talk about these movies.
So Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
Where do we want to start with Rosemary's Baby? Do we want to start at the beginning? Do we want to jump into some other topic on it?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough.
Why don't we just start talking about the movie?
Yeah.
And with that, we'll talk about the music.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, so the movie starts with a very open and airy setting, as we said before. It's kind of panning around Central Park, and actually starts off. It's funny. I was watching it today to make notes, and I had to go to the grocery store, so I put it on in the car.
Yeah.
And stopped to get a burger, and it hadn't started yet. And then it started, and it was playing through my car speakers. And I didn't realize how loud it was.
Yeah.
And it starts with these two really loud, kind of 2, 3, maybe really loud piano stabs, almost kind of high pitched. So I'm like, whoa! It freaked me out immediately and put me right into the mood, even though I wasn't sitting down watching the movie.
Yeah.
It was kind of more or less listening to it to start.
Right.
So I did come home and sit down and watch the rest of it. Yeah, so the music starts off with those stabs and then goes right into Rosemary singing what sounds like is probably Mia Farrow singing to her baby.
Yeah.
As the way that I took it.
Right.
Almost like a lullaby where the only lyrics in the song are la 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 la.
Right.
And it's got a really like kind of sweet vibe of singing a song to a baby, but also kind of changes pitch and kind of gets creepy.
Yeah.
Right. So that just music to start the movie and the panning around Central Park kind of sets the stage in a lot of ways for what is about to happen in terms of mood and kind of creating just like an undertone of creepiness.
Yeah. Just the opening, I think what I love about that is it feels like the camera, like you just said, it floats around Central Park and then it kind of just drifts into the apartment, right? Or like
it
Guy
drifts into Guy and Rosemary outside of the
I don't
brand.
mean literally. I'm just saying like it closes in onto them.
Onto them doing their viewing
the tour of
the Bramford building.
Yeah.
Where they ultimately decide to live.
Right. Where John Lennon was shot outside that building. Do you know that? Isn't that creepy?
Whoa. Yeah, it's creepy. It's almost like Roman Castevet was whoever was the sinister devil.
Mercado. Mercado.
Really kind of had his hand on the building, I guess. I didn't know that. That's insane.
Yeah, John Lennon, who wrote Helter Skelter, that Charles Manson used.
I'm not a 60s guy, so this is...
Well,
this is
okay, but you know what Helter Skelter is, right? So it's a Beatles song, and that's apparently one of the songs that Manson used to inspire the Manson family to go kill Roman Polanski's wife.
Okay,
isn't that just a crazy little?
Yeah.
So Lennon died in front of the building. Whatever, you get what I'm saying. But anyway, so it goes into John Cassavetes.
We can go more about the lore surrounding these movies if you'd like to. I don't know anything about that.
I don't care.
If you want to talk about it, it's kind of cool and interesting.
It is, yeah.
I mean, just that little tidbit that you brought up is pretty insane.
Yeah, I think that's the only. Yeah. That's the craziest. But but yeah, the fact that it like kind of comes in, it's very unsettling because it comes in to these like two young people who. Well, I guess, I don't know, it's not unsettling as you watch it because the movie does a really good job of not telling you immediately that this is a horror movie.
No, it builds up.
You go into, the marketing obviously tells you that, but like, it builds up very naturally and good.
Just to that point, especially from a first watch. You're looking out for stuff as you watch it a few more times. I've seen the movie maybe, including today, now maybe like 5 times all the way through. And, there's just so much to unravel and so much going on.
Yeah. Rewatchability for this might be the best of all these three. Actually,
I would say so because I think it's the fullest of the movies in terms of how the plot unfolds and the things that you have to pick up in the movie are a little bit more deep, I think, than the other two movies.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on the surface in the other two.
The telling has more layers, I think.
Because you're more immersed in the film, because it pulls you, it kind of sucks you into it.
Yeah.
In a way that kind of puts blinders on you.
Yeah.
It really kind of puts you.
It breaks
in first viewing. It just kind of leaves you with a lot of questions, and in Rosemary's head space, I think it's mostly told from her viewpoint.
Yeah, well, I think it puts you in Rosemary's shoes and kind of John Cassavetes' shoes really early on. The movie immerses you because it doesn't immediately say this is a horror movie. It leads up to that very naturally, which you already touched on.
I see. Yeah.
I think the dreaminess of it is part of what leads you up to that, because the movie does such a good job of walking that line between, and a million movies have done this now, but they do it so well in part because people have seen this movie, and this movie exists, you know?
Yeah.
Like the framing of Rosemary's dreams, and like the framing even of the end when she goes into the Castavet's apartment.
Sure, yeah.
The framing is very similar because like in her dreams, she'll be like in a crowded area that feels like, oh, people should be interacting with her, but they're not paying attention to her. And then she goes into the Castavet's apartment, and it's like really similar. The
dream
framing is really,
sequences?
it's really similar to the dream sequence.
Even though it's real. Even though the dream sequence partially is real.
Right.
Some
right,
are.
exactly.
Some are.
Yeah,
some
or
are,
there's some subconscious is like bleeding into, or I guess what's really happening is bleeding into.
It's like if you ever have a dream where you're watching a TV show, and the things that they're saying in the TV show are happening in your dream, but the thing that's going on in your dream is completely created.
Context.
It's completely different creation in your mind.
Right.
But some of the dialogue gets inserted into. I had that today or this morning as I was like kind of before I woke up. I was watching a show, and that happened. I mean, so that's what's going on in the way that these shots are filmed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
I hope that made sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Like I've never seen, or I've seen very, very few movies pull that dream quality or the dream logic off like that.
Exactly.
Where it's like people are saying things that kind of make sense, but they totally aren't in the right context.
And what's important too is she's being more or less drugged with or served potions.
Yeah.
That kind of lead to this happening throughout the entire film, but more specifically to her dreams as she's falling asleep.
Yeah.
But she's out of it throughout a lot of the film.
Yeah.
There's one scene where she ends up, and this is just playing to that whole idea of the movie being dreamlike.
Yeah.
She starts eating raw meat at a certain point.
Yeah.
She eats a raw steak at one point, and at another point she's eating some raw chicken liver, and she sees herself in the reflection of the toaster oven. She had no idea that she was eating the chicken liver. Mm-hmm. She sees herself in not the toaster oven, a toaster, like a metal toaster. She sees her reflection, realizes she's eating chicken liver, and then goes to the sink and like throws it up because she was in this like trance. Yeah,
totally.
Which she's wearing. So anyway,
so the movie just gives you that false sense of trust the entire time, and looking back, I mean, even now it's funny because we've talked about this before on the pod, where like you have a different relationship with the movie every time you watch it, and this movie definitely does that, because there's sometimes I watch it and I'm like, exactly. I think maybe it is in her head, and then other times I watch it where I think, no, there's no way it's in her head. Most recent
it is
viewing,
and it isn't, I think.
Right. Well, what do you mean?
Just in the ways that we described her being drugged and her being in this trance throughout the movie.
Yeah.
But everything that is kind of surrealistically happening to her is actually happening.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Right. But there's enough of that doubt because of what the Castavets, the doubt that they put into her head. There's enough of that doubt constantly circling your mind, I think, as the viewer. Where like it could all be bullshit. Like maybe I mean, literally the last scene, yes, it shows what happened, but everything up until that scene.
It does kind of play that cat and mouse game with the viewer, where you're kind of wondering. I think this is what you're saying too. Is she could just be going through her pregnancy could really be affecting her mentally.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of the like odd scenarios surrounding what's going on during her pregnancy could be. I see what you're saying. That she could be making some of this up in her own mind. Now, I do think ultimately the film doesn't.
No, I agree.
I would say 100 with certainty that
the movie says no. But my argument
says
for it saying yes is the fact that, again, the Castavet's apartment at the end is framed like one of her dreams, so maybe it's alluding to the fact that this is a dream or an illusion of some sort, you know?
Okay, that she's still having a dream in the final scene.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Right, because
it's pretty out there.
Right.
And to that point, it's very interesting that Charles Grodin is her original doctor.
Yeah.
She only sees him one time before she's put on to this other Dr. Saperstein.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's finally fed up, and she realizes, because Saperstein smells like the tannis root, she ends up going back right before her due date to Dr. Hunt? Charles Grodin? Dr. Hunt?
I forget the character.
Either way, Grodin.
Yeah.
And she explains this elaborate plot against her.
Mm-hmm.
And then he basically calls her doctor, and they kind of get her out of there because he thinks she's nuts. And what he says I kind of screwed this up in the way I went about telling it, but when Rosemary is explaining the grand plot against her, he says, well, I don't believe in witchcraft, but I do believe that there are crazy people out there.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's basically saying she thinks she's crazy.
Yeah, maybe. He may be saying that. And, he may be alluding to the fact that you kind of are lulled into this sense of security that Rosemary finally broke through to somebody, and somebody's actually going to help her, because this is a film of loneliness.
Yeah.
It's her and the baby. She keeps talking to the baby.
Yeah.
And saying it's going to be okay, we're going to figure out a way out of this, but she's ultimately so lonely because she's surrounded by only people that she thinks are out to get her.
Right.
And that builds and builds and builds and builds and becomes more of that plot against her.
Yes.
And then you finally get this reprieve for her, where Grodin, you think, is going to side with her and put her in a hospital. She's going to be able to deliver this baby without the influence of this cult.
Right.
And ultimately...
he gets God.
Ultimately,
or
yeah.
She gets God.
Ultimately,
he
she gets God
too.
And then you think that, he is in on the plot too.
Right. Oh,
or not.
I never thought that.
Or not, to your point.
I never thought he was in on the plot. I thought he represented...
Maybe nobody's in on the plot, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I thought he... Well, no, not that either. I think if there... You could have something down the middle where he's not in on the plot, but the cult has done such a good job of making Rosemary seem crazy that he represents, like, people who turn a blind eye to this.
And after many watches, we still have these questions. Like I said, I watched it again today with even more... The more and more I watch it, the more analytical I become. And so still, these questions are still out there.
Do you have more questions about the movie that you want to talk? Like, I don't know, because I've got questions about it. Or just I want your take on something.
Well, okay, so I think we kind of already went over this, that I took it at more or less face value again after another watch.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting that you brought up, you may have said to play devil's advocate or not, but to bring up the fact that it could all be in her head. And again, after seeing it, I was convinced that it's not, but you just made me now think of all these scenes and that it could be the case, and so that's where my question still lies with this film. I think it's such a good movie that after all this time, unless I'm a complete fucking moron, I still don't know what's going on ultimately with what's happening with this movie.
I think if you're engaging with it on any level, you're gonna watch it in a different way each time. Like nobody watches this movie for the scenes. I mean, the filmmaking is good; it's got good scenes. But if you're gonna go back and watch a scene from a movie, you're gonna do it from, well, out of these three anyway, you're gonna do it from The Exorcist or The Omen over Rosemary, probably because not because Rosemary's a bad movie or the individual scenes aren't good, but it's what's so watchable about it is the flow of the scenes together.
It's a beautifully put together movie from beginning to end, and it lends itself to exactly what you're saying.
But that's part of the fun of it, is engaging with it in that, like, will they or won't they? Not will they or won't they, but like, in that...
Is it or isn't it?
Yeah, is it or isn't it? Exactly.
Right.
But again, you can find, it is kind of over here, but it's kind of not over here. That's the fun that I have, is looking between the lines of those lines, which sounds super pretentious. But with Grodin's character, you can pick any character in this movie. Her friend, I forget her friend's name, but the older guy who dies.
Hutch.
Hutch.
I think it's Hutchison or Hutchinson, but Hutch is what she calls him. Yeah.
Right.
I don't even know his first name.
I don't know what he represents. I mean, he's another character where I've never really looked at the movie.
He represents kind of like an out for her, or a way for her to... He's not a part of the cult, so
of course,
he represents the same thing that her friend group represents.
Yeah.
Almost a different perspective on what she's going through.
Right, which is a really refreshing scene in the movie for that reason.
What, with Hutch or with her friends? She has a party and invites all of her old friends that she's completely shut out since they've moved into this devil house, right? So or witch house more so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the devil impregnates her in that house. So
just a house of darkness overall.
Yeah, the Bramford is a hell of a building.
How orchestrated do you think picking Rosemary and Guy was?
I don't know how orchestrated picking Rosemary and Guy specifically was. I think in a way it fell into their laps. But I know that having a couple eventually was orchestrated, and I think the timing worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
But I don't know how orchestrated that was. Now, once the Castevets had that couple, the orchestration was masterful.
Right.
From, again, if we put the caveat of it being a plot against Rosemary and her baby.
Yeah.
So through that lens. Now, I think we can we discuss the rest of it as face value and it being that way, so we don't have to keep throwing that out?
Course, yeah.
Okay. All right. So in terms of it being a plot against Rosemary and her baby, I think it was masterfully orchestrated, and Rosemary keeps realizing these coincidences and that they're not coincidences.
Yeah.
As the movie goes, it progressively gets more and more obvious that everything is an orchestration against her and her baby.
I think one of the most interesting parts of the movie is where Guy and Rosemary go to the Castevets' house for the first time. Like their courtship, like, because I think that sequence, or I guess you could call it that scene, even though it's a couple different kind of, it's broken up into a few different sections, but really like them playing to Guy's ego and like plucking out these really like trivial things that Guy takes as like huge compliments. Like the idea of Minnie
buttering up Guy.
Right, yeah. The idea of Minnie
orchestrated.
Right. The idea of Minnie going over to Rosemary's house to do recon when she's inviting them to the dinner. And then getting information from Rosemary.
And then Roman pretending like he doesn't know them from anything and using some of the information that Minnie plucked from Rosemary to compliment Guy.
Well, he acknowledges he's like he brings up Luther, right? And
I think that's the play.
He's like, were you? Did you ever get that part, Guy? Like, so he knows that Guy is an actor, right?
Yeah, but
and he mentions the fact that he had seen Guy in a previous performance.
Right.
He's like, go ahead.
Which ultimately I don't believe he did. I think
no, of course not. No. I think
it's a lie to set up Guy and make Guy believe that he's a fan of Guy.
Yes.
And Guy's very vain, as you mentioned earlier.
Right.
So he immediately ingratiates himself with Guy.
Right. And it's funny to me how vain Guy is, especially rewatching it and like realizing Guy is so vain that he thinks that or egotistical that he thinks that just doing a small gesture with his arm would be enough to get this guy's attention. And this guy, because he's so worldly and like
well-traveled,
right? It's just so fun. It's just like that upper crust like idea of I don't know. Of like there being such an intelligence to that one thing. It's just such bullshit.
And Guy bullshits, or Roman bullshits again, specifically by mentioning that his father was a theatrical producer. So that adds more grandiosity to his lore.
Yes.
Right? As a well-traveled man.
Right. And his credibility for what he can specifically do for Guy.
Exactly, his credibility. That kind of goes into where the plot starts to go from there.
Yeah.
And what's very important in the plot is the kind of thing that I want to tie into it, and what was my main focus on this viewing was how does Adrian Marcato play into what the plot is?
Oh, wait, Marcato, you mean Roman Well, Castevets is his son, right?
Stephen Marcato is the son of Adrian Marcato.
Right.
And I want to discuss Adrian and Stephen.
Yeah, okay.
More so Adrian, because he's got an overarching presence throughout the film.
Right.
And that plays into the plot against Rosemary and her baby. You can even their using of Guy to plot against Rosemary.
Right. Well,
he's their in.
Maybe Adrian is,
and we discussed that in the
first shots. Maybe the Central Park shots in the beginning of the movie are Adrian's point of view.
Maybe
it's a spirit,
like Adrian's
and it drifts
spirit.
Like into.
That's excellent. I mean, that's
conjecture.
By default,
yeah.
But that's a great just idea of this movie allows you as the viewer to make up some stuff that you want to make up, and
yeah, whatever bullshit theories you want to throw out there. But it feels airy. It's airy enough to have that. Go ahead though.
So, specifically to them moving into the Bramford, you learn about the Bramford and Adrian Marcato in their first scene with Hutch.
Right.
So they're having dinner with Hutch, and he describes to them, like, he explains to them his knowledge of the history of this building, which he would have as a landlord in New York.
Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah, he would know that.
Hey, don't bark. What?
Django.
Is it Adrian Marcato?
No. I hope we're not in the Bramford.
Yeah.
I hope not. I don't know the history of this building. I know the short history of this building. We had some plumbing issues and heating and electrical problems in February.
Oh yeah,
March.
Right.
Anyway.
February. But okay, yeah. So Hutch would know all of this shit about the Bramford because
it stands to reason that he's in tune with what's going on with the buildings in New York, especially as I assume that they're staying. They're in Manhattan, so and they're in these old buildings. Anyhow, so Adrian Marcato as an entity is first introduced by Hutch, and as is the Bramford and its history, which is very important because all of these things start to surround the plot as they relate to Bramford itself. And the Bramford is basically under the control of the Marcatos.
Because I have like shit to say off this, but I feel like you're getting at something bigger.
So there are witches that live there. They're the Trench sisters, and they were eating babies. Okay. Now I don't know exactly how that plays into it, but you start to learn that babies are going to play into this in a big way. Okay. So they were there at the turn of the century. I don't know if it was okay. So that. Adrian Marcato was born in 1846. In around 1890, he claims publicly to have conjured up the physical form of the devil. Okay? Now, as that happened, there's also some history. I don't remember if they explain how he died, and maybe I missed it, and I can't remember. And that may be sort of important.
Yeah, I don't think they talk.
Or maybe they never discussed.
I don't think they reference.
He actually died because they
say he got like banished from the area.
No, they say that he was nearly killed.
Yes. Yeah.
In the Bramford, this is what Hutch says, that he was nearly killed in the lobby of the Bramford, and Rosemary ends up reading later that he was actually nearly killed in text, as the book that she reads is saying that he was actually nearly killed outside of the building. I don't know what significance that has. It probably does, because the movie's so deep and the plot is so
nothing is left to mistake, I don't think, in the movie.
No, I mean, some is left to imagination and interpretation, but
you wouldn't deliberately put those two things into a movie.
Anyhow, fast forward to 1959. I mean, that's about all we know about Adrian. I mean, that there was some witchcraft going on in the building. And then we also know via the interaction with Hutch at the beginning that there was a baby that was found in the basement in 1959. Now, when Rosemary is impregnated by the devil, and who Adrian Marcato's in the room in her dream, and she's never seen him before, but his physical form that she later on sees as in a picture in a book is in the dream, and he's there during the impregnation scene. And in that scene, to play to the death in 1959 with the baby, they said there was a baby found wrapped in newspaper in the basement in 1959, killed. And they used blood in the. They used ritual. They used blood in the ritual
mating.
In the ritual to impregnate Rosemary with the son of the devil, right? I think that it was the baby's blood from 1959 because this takes place in 1965. It ends up going into 1966, which I have another point on that. But in 1965, so it's only 6 years later. So it stands to reason that they could have preserved that baby's blood. Clearly, they say that there was a baby that was killed in the building. And they use blood, and she ends up reading later that they use baby's blood in rituals.
I never thought about that.
I mean, it literally shows them drawing on her in red. And we can only assume that, blood. So, Adrian's tied into that scene. Do you want me to go further?
I always thought it was Rosemary's blood.
No, she has scratches on her, but I mean, it's a significant amount of red that's painted.
I always just kind of assume, it's funny. You're probably right. Should we wait?
He's cool.
Yeah. It probably was the baby's blood. I never. Well, why do you think? Why do you think that it was the baby's blood?
Because they specifically made a point to bring up that a baby was killed in the basement in 1959.
Right. But then why do you think the her friend, whose name I forget, the Italian girl,
Terry, who she meets in the very beginning, she only meets her in one scene.
Right. So what do you think the significance? I agree. There's significance to all this shit.
I don't know what it is. There is a scene where they hear. I think I started to bring this up earlier, where they hear through the partition between the two. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the Castavets and the Woodhouse's apartments were one apartment.
Right.
In the past, and now there's a partition between them, like a kind of crappy wall that's built between the two, and they can hear a lot that's going on in the Castavet's apartment. And Minnie is mentioning something about Minnie or Roman are mentioning something about Terry not going along with their whole thing. So maybe they were trying to get Terry to go along with it, and she did it, and then they found a better version of. A better way to get into using Guy to manipulate Rosemary than trying to just manipulate this one girl on their own. Mm-hmm. She was wearing the Tannis root necklace before Rosemary. Right. So that's symbolically, I think that's...
Yeah, she was living with
She was being groomed. I think she was being groomed, and then they found a better option, so they offed her.
Which is kind of playing to the theme of the movie. And she's a single woman, right? So it kind of plays to the themes of the movie with what it's saying about like women kind of being alone in the world, and like it's people kind of hail this as like a big feminist movie. It's kind of interesting that Rosemary or the cast that need Guy / a man to like be the catalyst to fuck Rosemary over. Like they need the guy that she's the closest with in order to do that.
That's literally what happens if you look at her and Rosemary and Terry.
Right. If Rosemary were alone in all this, her guard would have been up so much more. And she probably would have ended up dead, but she wouldn't have ended up, giving birth to the devil.
Maybe not, because they had Guy to manipulate her.
Exactly.
And she was fully trusting of Guy as her husband. I mean, she's very romantic in the movie, and she romanticizes having a baby and a husband. And she... In the first scene where they're getting into just viewing the apartment, I mean, she wants a family. This is her. She doesn't work. As far as we know, she doesn't work. I mean,
no.
She mentions to Guy that she's going to leave or switch doctors at some point, and she's like, "If you won't pay for him, I don't even care. I'll figure out a way to do it." So it's like they allude to the fact that Rosemary doesn't have her own money. Yeah. She's from Omaha, Nebraska, so I mean, she's
alone.
We can guess that. I mean, she's not coming from wealth, Although she does speak like a New Englander or something, which maybe is a miss in the movie. Yeah, maybe.
She's also framed very. I don't know. I love this movie, but Rosemary. I don't know. Even though I access her as I'm going on her journey with her.
Yeah.
But she's such a baby. Like her character is very babyish.
Yeah.
And very. I mean, she does take agency at the end, which is great. And it's showing her growing up. She's becoming a mother, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. But throughout the movie. It's not like she makes bad decisions either. I think it's just Mia Farrow is so babyish and feels so dependent, which I guess you are dependent in a pregnant state.
Yeah.
And it adds to the vulnerability of the movie.
But she's also very unto herself, strong in terms of she does take on the loneliness by herself and takes refuge in kind of discussing the issues that she's going through with her baby because she has nobody else.
And she does play detective also.
And she's very analytical. There are a couple points on that throughout the movie. Yeah. The first time you notice that is in the very first scene where they're viewing the apartment. She's the first one that notices that the dresser had been moved from a different space to in front of the... Now, how significant that is, I don't know. I think it's more or less
it's a character
to her
thing.
Character. Exactly. So there's that. She also notices randomly Roman's pierced ears, and just to give him more of a creepy vibe, especially at the time, you wouldn't see an old man with, closed up piercings back in that
it wouldn't have been nearly as common.
Yeah, so she thought it was silly that his ears were pierced, but it was also a thing that nobody had noticed that she, she notices little things. She's, like you said, to play to her skills as a detective.
Perceptive.
Very perceptive.
Yeah, I agree.
She's also skeptical throughout the entire... She is and she isn't. I mean, she's trying to be, but she's being manipulated. So it's a tug of war for her agency in the movie.
Wait,
Does that make sense?
The tug of war in the sense that, what, she's been gaslit the whole time, even though she's really perceptive.
Even though she's very perceptive and she's very skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, she doesn't want to hang out with the cast of... She's immediately very friendly and a very nice person and wants to hang with the Castavetes right off the bat. Minnie invites her over and she's like, yeah, let's go.
She wants to be polite.
And then she very quickly doesn't want anything to do with them, and she's just having to deal with these intrusive people in her life.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite happens with Guy, where he wants nothing to do with them at the beginning. He says that if you buddy up with an old couple like this, you'll never get rid of them.
Right.
And ultimately, he just, completely gets taken over by this older couple. So his story goes the exact opposite direction. So again, in terms of the tug of war of the movie, that dynamic's going on too. So it's a very continuously throughout the movie, and this is why it's hard to know what the reality is at the end, because you're being pulled in two different directions constantly on so many different levels.
I think it's interesting that Rosemary, because the other two movies here have very prominent priest characters. There's never... I know that Rosemary doesn't know what the extent of them wanting her baby, what that leads to. She doesn't understand, or not understand. She has no reason to think these are, devil worshippers who want to impregnate me with the Antichrist.
No, as coincidences keep popping up, she puts it together.
Yeah, there's literally the Pope is mentioned in the movie, and in her, when she's, getting impregnated, I think, the Pope shows up. The Pope is in town. There's that whole thing going on. It's interesting. She mentions being Catholic. Did I already say that? Okay.
No,
she mentions growing up Catholic. So it's kind of interesting. She never goes to a priest for help or anything like that in this movie.
That's interesting. She never does. Well,
it's never an option.
Not only does she not go to go for religious help, or like you said, like a priest to even discuss, where Chris McNeil. I think we're going to segue to the next movie now. Chris McNeil, an atheist, seeks out a priest for her problem. That's a really good point. Rosemary never does, but to go back to her loneliness, she doesn't even reach out. Her parents are never mentioned.
Right.
So she has no relationship with her parents throughout the situation, and we don't know what her relationship is with them before, because they never bring it up. She also completely excludes her friends from her life. And her good friend Hutch doesn't even know she's pregnant until like a couple months into her pregnancy. Yeah. And that's somebody she's closest with in New York City.
Yeah, I always kind of got the sense either she is an orphan or she ran off with Guy at a young age. Her parents didn't approve.
Because he's older.
Yeah. And I definitely get the sense she cut ties. I mean, Hutch is clearly a father figure for her.
That's a good point.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, she is all alone. And that's part of what's great about the movie is the fact that, you've mentioned it a few times, her baby is the only thing that she can confide in.
Exactly.
But the baby is so directly tied to the baby is the MacGuffin of the movie, basically.
She's instinctually eating raw meat because of the baby in her system craving
because of her maternal instinct. So the movie it's the best of these three at putting you in the head of the character, but simultaneously making you second guess. It makes you second guess the way the character would second guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just totally put into her point of view in her mind.
It's the best,
her dilemma.
Yeah, I think it's the best character study of these three.
Excellent.
By far.
Excellent.
The Exorcist.
This movie was always a huge build-up. I mentioned earlier in this episode, I only saw this for the first time within the last year. I've known of the movie for forever, obviously, because it's the fucking Exorcist.
Yeah. And you're also not a big horror guy.
I'm not horror fans are their own kind of... They are the craziest fans of all time, or the most dedicated, at least.
Yeah. They're.
What's that?
They're just so diehard. It's such a genre that's.
There's so many subgenres that accompany the horror genre. But anyway, I always thought this was going to just scare the living shit out of me because when I was a little kid, I don't know if you remember this, we were at your apartment once in Delaware. and there was this little maze that you showed me.
Oh,
And I was probably, I don't
right.
know, 11 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the maze was like 3 different levels. The first level was
This
super...
is
on
kind
the
of early
computer.
internet shit.
Yeah, I was on the computer, and the first level was like a huge, wide, easy thing.
Well, it was only
Second-
one level, and what it was...
No, it was 3 levels. I'll explain it.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first level was like super easy. Second level, a little bit harder, but you had to pay a little bit more attention. Third level also... Wait, no, you're right. It was only 1 level.
Well, it's
But
it's a maze that
Yeah,
starts out
yeah.
fat, and it's not even like a hard maze. It's an easy maze. It starts out really wide,
Yeah.
and it progressively gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and you have to
down
use,
to like 1 pixel.
and exactly, and you have to use the mouse to get. So you get so focused and concentrated on the screen. And I
Yeah.
don't know if any of you remember this because it was before there were memes. It was a meme that was being passed around.
Yes.
And you had to get down to that last little pixel and still
Right.
try to get to the end of it and fit the mouse pointer
Yeah.
through it. And you're completely focused
You're like
on the
an
screen.
inch from the screen. And then Reagan's face from The Exorcist pops up. And it pops up for like a second, and then after a second, like a huge blood-curdling scream comes out, and that scared the living...
Oh yeah, it was a thing where you had, if you were pranking somebody with it, you turn the volume all the way
Right,
up.
which you definitely
Yeah.
did. But
And I got him.
yeah, and that...
He didn't shit his pants, but
But I came damn near... Like, I honestly think that, like, psychologically that... Not like I'm scarred from it,
you're like,
but
I'm not watching this
for the
movie.
longest time, I thought The Exorcist was just going to be the scariest
That's how
thing
I feel
ever.
about the witch when I see her naked, the old lady naked
Yeah.
in the cave scene. I'm just like, I'm out.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
I'm
a
to
little
this day,
too-
like I don't even get scared by these movies, but
Right,
that
and
movie
that's just
I won't fuck
disturbing,
with.
right?
Yeah,
But The Exorcist, I think it's just like it's watching French Connection, and then just manning up, becoming an adult, and just
Yeah.
being like, all right, fuck it, I'm just gonna watch this thing.
Yeah.
And that's I thought it popped away for a second, but anyway. So there was so much build up to this movie. I had seen scenes, and I knew all of the iconic shit about
sure.
The Exorcist.
Yeah. It's hard
but
not to after.
Yeah, it was really just it's been parodied 40 billion times.
Yeah, and I mean, in the original trailer, I mean, or I don't know if it's the original trailer, but one of the theatrical trailers, I believe, they allude to the fact that it's the scariest movie of all time.
Yeah.
Maybe it
Which-
was the re-release. Which can I go into that?
Yeah.
My first interaction with the movie.
Yeah.
I saw it in the movie theater in high school when they did the director's cut re-release, which was the one with the spider walk, and
Yeah.
it was a pretty excellent movie to watch in high school. I don't remember the date that it came out, but I imagine they would have put it out around Halloween time.
Probably.
don't
Or
know.
summer. Like
Could
Blockbuster.
have been. But it was a big thing. Like everybody was going again, like that fervor.
Yeah.
Everybody was going to see The Exorcist on the re-release because the trailers were pretty
Yeah.
scary looking, and it was reintroduced to a brand new audience,
Right.
and that was my interaction with it for the first time. So like maybe like 16 or 17, maybe 15.
That's a great age
You know,
for that.
yeah, it was like one of those it was like seeing Scream in the theater for the first
Yeah.
time or something like that.
Yeah. It's something that iconic
Yeah,
also.
yeah, and it was a freak out. I mean, I think now we're more desensitized to a lot of things,
Right.
but or maybe now at an older age too, as I've seen a lot more movies, and maybe they could do the same thing for high schoolers at this time. But
Right.
it was a pretty excellent re-release.
It's a great high school movie.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, yeah, there are kind of jump scares in the movie, but it's just creepy and funny, and it's really
Yeah,
the blasphemy in the movie from the demon is so.
Yes.
It's so like high school, like I
Yeah.
can't believe you just said that, like that, or her peeing on the floor. There are a lot of like quote what we would call like shock moments now.
yes, exactly.
So that's great. I mean, I think for this,
That was my first interaction with it.
Part of my love for The Exorcist is definitely watching it in the context of Sorcerer and just like the filmmaking itself. I mean, I said it earlier. It's so constantly relying on experience. Where you could say that for Rosemary's Baby too, but this movie,
It's true, yeah.
there's not a scene that isn't about being honest and like memorable. I think even like dumb shit with like the detective, which the detective is like the worst character in all 3 of these movies, probably.
Yeah.
Where it's just he's kind of, I like him, and I like Lee J. Cobb, but he doesn't serve any purpose, and he's a horrible detective.
Yeah, it's Lee J. Cobb or Kinderman.
Yeah, Ken.
Does add an extra dynamic to the movie, like a kind of secular dynamic.
Yeah.
Just kind of I don't hate that he's in it after watching it again. And I
Good.
kind of hated that he was in it after watching it the previous time.
Huh.
And I have seen this movie in the last couple months 2 times.
Yeah.
So the most recent watch, I appreciated Kinderman a little bit more, and I can't pinpoint exactly why. So we don't have to go into them that much because I still have questions about why I may or may not like Kinderman.
I might want to circle back.
I might start flipping on him.
Yeah, well,
before I thought he was a completely useless character.
No, I think he is.
I think he adds another.
I think
plot
he's a bad detective, and that is enough to at least put him in the camp. He's a bad detective, and that's enough to put him in the camp of being a bad character. Because you want a character who's competent, and he's not.
Well, you want a cool detective too. I mean, he's like. He's a fanboy. Well, he's a film fan, which you think is kind of cool, and maybe Friedkin's doing his like Tarantino thing at that time.
I don't think he's a film. I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I cut in?
Yeah,
because he asked Chris for the autograph.
No, because anytime he wants to ingratiate himself with somebody, he talks about going to the movies.
Going to the pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And he brings up
point.
specific movies that he went to see, and he knows the actors in the movies.
Right. Okay.
And he's seen them multiple times.
I'll buy that.
So for him to drop like these movie titles, almost, and finally we brought up Tarantino. This is the longest we've gone without bringing up Tarantino in a podcast.
Yeah.
And we can get off of him again because we don't have to keep doing that. But anyway, I think it's like one of those things where it makes that character a little bit interesting because I think it plays to a little bit of the indulgence of the director in that sense. That's all on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also he adds humanity to the movie in a lot of ways. Where like all the characters in the movie are very like dark, or they're going through some shit.
Yeah, they're so, and he's not. I mean, he's just doing his detective thing. He's pretty old. You think he's probably about to retire. Like,
Right.
Yeah. So that's. I think. Do we need to talk about
Kinderman? No.
I don't like him that much. But I don't spend much time on it.
Yeah.
I haven't flipped that much, but
right.
Yeah.
Wait, why do we bring Kinderman up?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. But anyway, this movie is. I was saying like it's constantly from the first. And people say this about movies all the time, but I think The Exorcist is a perfect example of something that it starts off. It's very disorienting because you watch the trailers for the movie, or you know anything about it. And you're like, all right, this takes place in America in a little house. And it's about a girl possessed by the devil. The movie opens, and they're in a desert at an excavation site. I know you already brought this up, but just like that idea of starting with something otherworldly for an American audience, so disorienting. Obviously, that opening sequence is fucking beautiful. That final shot, that iconic shot of Marion and the statue,
that
the
entire
dogs attacking
sequence
each other,
is one of
so
the best
disturbing
film sequences I've ever seen in any film. Period.
Totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree.
So we can.
Yeah, so I think this movie, part of what sets it apart is, again, not only between these 3 movies, but with any movie ever, I think it has one of the best child performances of any time.
That's a good point. I mean, how could you expect a kid to pull that performance off at all?
Right.
Didn't it fuck her up or something? Like,
yeah, physically she got her back got fucked up in some way, and apparently Ellen Burstyn, like she broke something or twisted something in a permanent way from this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, the movie was very like demanding as a like a physical performance and.
Oh, for Reagan, the contortions and obviously twisting her head all the way.
I mean, I don't know much about what their tactics were for,
but it was all practical.
The practical
all
effects,
camera stuff. I mean, literally.
I mean, it looks like it.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I have a question. Was it her the entire time?
As opposed to like a stunt double?
Yeah.
There's a stunt double for the spider walk.
Well, I mean, I don't know how they could have.
Or like some kind of mechanical.
I don't think not.
I mean, like her head didn't literally twist around, so they had some sort of way to do that. But
I don't know what they did.
They probably stood her upright and spun her around and had a fake body.
Yeah, probably.
But so there was some like level of practical mechanics to be able to pull that off. But in terms of like
the
doing all this weird
stuff. But the majority
of
it was her. Okay.
I suppose, I wonder how they pulled off the floating above the bed.
I think they had her on wires.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Wires.
Yeah. Anyway, so your point.
Just over. I think her acting, and she wasn't an actor. Like apparently, Friedkin had been looking for a kid for like months and months, couldn't find anybody. I don't know if they were getting to the point where they're like, all right, we can't make the movie. But either way, at a certain point, Reagan and her mom showed up in Friedkin's office, and they were like, we read the novel. What's the actress's name? Linda Blair. Linda wants to be part of this. and she was just dynamite on set apparently.
Really?
I mean, she clearly did a great job.
Yeah, she's good.
But yeah, I think it's one of the most believable. I think this movie is just like, because Friedkin has a documentary background, it feels the most realistic. Like the sequence in the hospital with Ray, like that feels like it's a fucking documentary. It feels so honest. I don't know. It works on so many different levels for that reason. Not only for that reason, but also Ellen Burstyn and the preacher and all that stuff. What were you gonna say?
How do you feel about the pacing of the movie? Because I think in the hospital scenes they're important.
Yeah.
Like the science versus nature aspect is important, and you have to go through the little experiments or not experiments, but the procedures, the medical procedures that she goes through,
right?
To give the doctors their idea of whether or not she's got brain lesions, or how do you feel that messes with the pacing of the movie? I think it does a little bit. I think they do a good job of intertwining Karras and his storyline with what's going on there, so that helps the pacing.
Right.
But anytime you have an entire almost half hour of a movie where you have to go through a medical prognosis and multiple doctors being involved, you're going to get some lulls in the movie and a little bit. It gets a little boring there. I think the pacing, he did the best he could for how to pace that out as the subject needed to be, but it does. I think that movie does lack in the pacing a little bit in that aspect.
It's a little slow.
It has to.
Yeah. I agree. I think the movie constantly has these little peaks, though, because you have Reagan clearly getting worse. So it does feel like it's moving along. And
so it's a payoff. Like you have this kind of like, all right, medical procedure, and then which has some shock some shock value to it too. Which the movie, I mean, shines in its shock value, even when they need to draw blood, or for some reason they like inject.
It's an opener. Not carotid. What is this? Carotid artery? Is that what it is?
Jugular?
Jugular, yeah. They have to open
they go into her jugular vein and it kind of spurts out a little bit, so you still, even in a hospital scene, still get some of that blood shock value, especially for a 1973 audience, or 74 when it actually came out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the pacing's a little slow to start.
Just one thing I wanted to bring up, because it's interesting.
There's still ice cream right after the vegetables, though, so it's like, because what's going on at home is so fucked up, it's like you are getting those little, like you mentioned, like payoffs.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, I think the movie, had it been made in 2021, the Exorcist shit, like the actual exorcising the demon out would have come within the first.
Well, have you seen any of the
movie.
exorcism of Emily Rose? Didn't we watch that recently?
Yeah, we did during the ice storm in Texas.
So more like that, where it's more about the. I don't know. There was a lot of like procedural stuff in that movie too.
There is a lot of it's a courtroom drama, but at the same time, it's done in flashback, so it can it can go to the fucked up stuff as soon as it wants to.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't climax until the climax, but.
I had a question, and you might be able to answer this. Bless you. I'm not sure, but okay. So I had a little bit of an issue, or I don't know if I could pinpoint how the timing worked out. I'm putting this a completely wrong way. So I'll start by saying, when Marin is in Iraq, and he has a buddy who, when the clock stops. Remember that creepy scene?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions about that. And okay, so the guy says to him, "Evil against evil, Father." I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
Damn it. Okay, so this is another thing that maybe isn't explained, or we'll have to analyze. And this is a great thing about Friedkin, is that he allows you to really kind of interpret the movie. Yeah. He puts what he puts on the screen, and you kind of have to.
You got to put it together.
So that wasn't my main point, though. My main point was, at the end of that scene, which is again one of the best scenes I've ever seen. Marin says something about, like, I have to go. There's something I must do. So
I found something about it.
Okay, good.
Read it.
Let me finish this, and then please tell me what you found. So. It seemed to me at that point, having some context in terms of like how the film plays out, that was a scene where he knew that he was leaving Iraq to go do the exorcism because he got called to to do the exorcism, and I never picked that up until this last watch.
Yeah, I always thought it was.
However, at the end of the movie, or I'm sorry, toward the end of the movie, where he's introduced as the second or the lead exorcist.
Yeah.
He's already back in Woodstock, and they call him when he's in Woodstock, New York, and they call him while he's in Woodstock, New York. When Karras goes to have a discussion with the priest to do the exorcism itself, to get the blessing for the exorcism, they say, okay, they have a discussion, they're like, okay, we can bring on this guy Marin, who's done one in Africa before, and they call him, but he's in Woodstock, New York. So my theory is completely blown out of the water.
Maybe not.
It seemed like he was going to go do
I love that idea.
Or does he just know that he's going to be summoned to do this?
I love that.
Because he had that interaction with the demon.
I think it's kind of there are three different ways you can take all this.
Yeah, this is where I'm going with it. Like,
way number one is
that?
The movie is totally at face value, chronological. That first
at
sequence,
face value, for sure.
Yeah, so you could. That's one option. Is it's at face value. They excavate something that is like they excavate that statue, right? They like find that statue.
They excavate a little token that has that face, and then he ends up going where the dogs are fighting, and seeing the statue, and, you know,
so he's either reminded
the wings
of
and that face,
right?
Which also, do they have that face in Sorcerer?
It's a similar face.
Similar face.
They start. It starts in a similar way.
Anyway,
like that. But that's one take on it. Like literally, he gets reminded of Pazuzu and then goes to that statue.
And you're saying Pazuzu because you read the book?
No, I just know that's
it's in the book.
Yeah.
They don't say it in the movie though.
No, I guess they don't. But I know that I think it's in like the second one, the third one, and all the other. I've never seen.
I kind of want to watch those because I watched all three
of
the Omen. Yeah.
Right. But I
I
just know it's Pazuzu because I just know. But
sorry, your point.
Well, yeah, so that's one way to take it. Another way to take it, which I really like this take, I've never thought of it.
No, the last time I saw it, I was like, oh shit, he's going to do the exorcism.
Yeah, the achronological take, I guess, is cool because it's like he got the call and now he's gonna go. Or take three is it doesn't matter if it's chronological or achronological, as long as it takes place before the events of the movie, which obviously it does, or at least before he gets to Reagan's house. Is he knows. Yeah, he knows that.
I see what you're saying. So one way or another, it definitely takes place before.
Yeah.
And then the other way to look at it is what you just said, is that it could be one of two.
Right.
One of two other ways.
Yeah, but I really like that idea of he actually got the call. Or maybe like, word around the campfire was like, oh, there's like this fucked up demon shit going on. Maybe Karras, you're on deck. Or Marin, you're on deck. Be ready, maybe. And then we have the excavation scene.
Okay.
Alright, so we already talked about the opening. Obviously, we've done to death the opening of this movie, but the movie, the reason it's my favorite, and the reason I think it's the truest to form to straight up, like, most badass horror movie is... Well, that sounds so lame. It's the most badass horror movie. But the reason it works so well is... It is so fucking subliminal, this movie. Like, the fact that the first time, when Chris first goes up to Reagan's room, and the window is open, and Reagan's, her covers are undone, like, you automatically get the sense. I mean, again, rewatching it, but even from the beginning, like, there's, like, a sense that something's wrong. Like, there's just something off about the idea of a bedroom window being wide fucking open.
The fact that Chris McNeil is hearing rats in the attic, and her butler is saying... No, there's definitely no rats in the attic.
Right.
She's going up there exploring.
There's like all this horrible shit going on around the town. Like all of that stuff leading up to the hospital scene when you first see that. All the shit with Karras too, with his mom, her dying, him dreaming, and all that jazz. That's not
very creepy in its presentation.
His dream sequences are really creepy.
Yeah,
but I think one of the
old ladies are creepy. I think.
Automatic. Old ladies alone in a room. Just there's something off-putting about that.
Well, so it's a mental hospital. That whole thing is
disturbing.
People out of their mind, and they are disturbed. Mm-hmm. So their disturbance plays on the camera. And Friedkin's really good at that too.
Which part?
Picking up those extras in the mental hospital.
Yeah.
Like, that shit creeps you out. The same way that the extras in the... Again, back to the first scene, you have people with missing eyes and missing limbs and all the craziness that's happening in Iraq in the first scene. Not to get you off.
No, you're right.
Topic,
It pours through the camera, though.
It does,
definitely does. But yeah, the opening scene, or not opening scene, but the scene of her in the hospital when it first shows that the pop of the demon's face. You know, it's just like a black background. You see the demon's face pop up.
Oh, who in the hospital?
When Reagan's in the hospital walking around, and she's like,
yes, that's right. That's right.
The demon's face first pops.
Is that the
up.
first one where it comes up? Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you look away for a second, sometimes you're gonna miss it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it only happens 5 times in the entire movie, or somewhere around
the face
there.
popping up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just does a fantastic job of just getting you, like the sounds, like even what Friedkin did with the soundscape. Like he used the sounds of bees humming in a jar, which apparently triggers something primal in humans.
Okay.
A flight or flight.
Of danger.
Fight or flight.
Danger, yeah.
Yeah. That mixed with pig squeals of pigs being led to slaughter. Because the animals, they know they're being led to slaughter.
Do you remember specific
so he used
scenes
those
where
noises to
because it's so subliminal, like you said. That was the point that you were making.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know where it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
That gives me something
feel
else
that.
to look at the next time. Again, rewatchability with these movies
Yes.
is so high. Like,
Yeah. I know he did more with the sound.
with Rosemary and
Exorcist, absolutely. And too, but in a lesser way.
To some extent, yeah.
But no, I mean, all of that, I don't know, I mean, that's why I love it. It's just, I think so much attention to detail went into the experience of the movie.
Yeah.
That's why it works for me anyway.
I think also just Friedkin's ability to wrap up a scene and say, okay, that's done.
That's all you need out of this.
And let you just guess the context.
Yeah,
You know.
but like a good example of that is like when the spider walk scene happens. At least in the theatrical cut, or I guess the director's cut. They actually shot more of the spider walk that I think is like a deleted scene. But so maybe it wraps it up. But I know in the director's
Pretty
cut,
quick.
you see the spider walk, and then it like zooms in on Reagan's face, and then it just cuts to the next scene. And somehow I guess they got her tied back up in the bed. Maybe she collapsed, and they picked her up and brought her back.
Yeah,
up
like
there.
where did
I
she
have
go
no
from
idea.
there? Because it
I
just
don't
shows
know.
her going down the stairs.
It's really, it
and then
peaks
next
in
thing
a
you
really
know-
creepy, scary, over
It's
the
again
top
shock
way.
value in that movie.
Right.
When Marin sees Reagan on the bed and she makes the same pose as
Yes.
the demon in the Iraq scene.
Right.
At the very end of the Iraq scene, it was that Marin's just interpretation of like what he saw? Did that actually happen?
Right.
It's on camera, but is it like real?
Right.
So there's some of that going on too.
And it's right before Marin's death scene, so I think there is an argument to be made there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that could all tie into, maybe he knows he's going to die from this. I mean, it kind of feels like a throwaway line, but when they say he almost died from his last exorcism, maybe he knows this is gonna be the last one.
I would say so. I mean, like he goes into that scene fearless, also.
Yeah.
Completely unwavering and fearless.
Right.
Where Karras is more questioning of it. Karras is questioning his faith throughout the whole thing, and then ultimately overcomes it.
Yeah.
And sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot going on for himself, so he's it stands to reason that he makes this sacrifice because.
Right.
His life kind of
His
went
mom
to shit.
died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But his life was so. They allude to the fact that, and if we can go into Karras a little bit, they allude to the fact that his uncle, as they go to visit his mother in the mental hospital, says she wouldn't have to be in this basically shithole if you had gone a different direction, decided not to become a priest, and decided to go the psychiatrist route and became he's a brilliant guy. He could have gone to Ivy League school and become this renowned doctor. I mean, he's chosen for a reason.
Yeah.
Because he's an exceptional person.
Right.
And he didn't choose the route that brought him to money. He chose the route that brought him to ultimately help him get rid of this evil in this situation, and that's where his life ended up.
Right.
But it took him going through the exorcism itself to get to that point, whereas Marin was kind of almost threw the reins to him and said, this is, I think Marin knew he was going to die. I think that's what you were saying.
Yeah. But he knew that he could throw the reins to Karras, and Karras would see it through, I guess.
Well, his faith was so strong that I think he knew he was with somebody that held that level of faith, even though there was a whole subplot
capable of holding
maybe he wouldn't do it, maybe he would, because we didn't know and that was part of the mystery of the movie too. Is we didn't know if he would be able to carry out the exorcism, and we've seen, to kind of like fast forward into the Omen, like the good guy doesn't always win.
Right.
You know?
Well, then the last thing I'll say about it is I think the final reason this is my favorite, and I'm not really sentimental with movies. Like I love cruel endings a lot, but this is the most optimistic movie of the three by far. It's I mean, there's a little bit of a hint that maybe Reagan is still, there's some fuckery going on, right? Like when she looks at
I've never seen the second or third Exorcist,
I don't know
or
if
however
Reagan's
many there might
involved,
be.
I think it deals more with the demon. I don't think it's like, and then Reagan got possessed again, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, the movie feels the most, maybe not complete, but definitely the most optimistic. It ties a bow the cleanest, even though it's practically speaking kind of messy because it shows that Kinderman is, shitty detective. But
to that point, we didn't talk about the very end of Rosemary's Baby, in which she kind of flips her script and joins the dark side, right? And that leaves the opening for sequels,
right?
Because she's going to be the mother of this. Yeah, no, they did. There's.
There are Rosemary's Baby sequels.
Yeah, there was like a mini series and some other remake or something like that. I don't know. I don't think they're worth watching. Maybe they are. I don't really care.
Yeah.
That movie exists in a vacuum to me. Right. But to your point of tying a bow on it, there was some open-endedness to it. Mm-hmm. And The Omen, there's 100% an open-endedness to it.
Okay, I think that to me brings us to The Omen, which to me the best part of The Omen is the ending. Like literally the last 5 seconds of that movie.
It's maybe the last 5 minutes.
No, I'm saying seconds. One of my favorite things about movies is the cut to black, and like when it decides to be like, all right, this is it. Like this is the last thing we want to leave you with, and the idea of leaving you with this little creepy kid smiling at the camera, and then the texts popping up about like the devil being real and all. Maybe it's because I believe in God and the devil and all that stuff.
There was one final text out of Revelation that from the Bible.
Yeah.
Not the other Revelation, the one from the Bible.
The one from the Bible, the Holy Bible.
Yeah, the Holy one. Yeah, King James Version, I think.
But yeah, I mean that to me, even if I didn't believe in all that stuff, like that would just. I just think it's the eeriest of the endings by far. Like because I think
because the kid smiles at the camera, it's kind of cheesy. Like that's the whole point of that movie is being like set up.
Yeah. But Rosemary's Baby, at least the difference here is Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's happy. She has made peace with the situation. At the end of The Exorcist,
it plays to her character because she's so 100% in tune with the baby.
Yeah.
That it stands to reason at the end of the movie that she's going to ultimately become the mother.
Right.
She goes in with a knife. I think she wants to kill all the people around the baby. I don't think she ever has like an idea that she's gonna go kill the baby.
I think she wants to just protect herself and have something. I don't think she has a plan to go.
No, I think she wants to protect the baby.
The baby.
Yeah.
Right, but either that's my point is.
Yes.
What's your point, dude? My point is. Or wait, no. What's your point, Walter? My point is it's my favorite ending because I think it's the most emotionally effective because.
The Omen?
Yes, because Rosemary's Baby, she has come to terms. She is, for all intents and purposes, she has made. She's happy. She's fine. She's accepted the circumstances, and she's accepted the circumstances.
I'd agree with that.
The Exorcist ends in a very kind of movie quality. All the bad guys die, and everything's fine. The good guys redeem themselves, blah, blah, blah.
The good guys do win in that one.
The Omen is such a fantastic ending because it's so gross. And the good guys lose and no good guy wins.
No.
It's not like they accept to, they're like, all right, we're going to raise this kid now.
It's set up as a trilogy, even though the second 2 movies fall short.
Right. Well, but it didn't, it's like The Matrix, where it's like it didn't need to have another 2 in order for me to feel.
No, you could have just left with the kid smiling at the camera creepily and then...
With the president, and that's all you tells you everything you need to know.
It does.
Because that's where the others go, basically.
Well, you said that The Exorcist ties a bow at the end, but I would say that's a pretty good putting a bow on it.
Yeah, that's true.
End scene as well, even though it leaves it open-ended for a sequel.
Right.
You still have we can guess where this is going moment.
Yeah, and I just think it's the most powerful, literal ending. And I'm not saying ending like, and then the plot wrapped up. I'm saying yes, that too, but in terms of just like filmmaking moments
Yeah.
of this kid turning around, staring at the camera, cutting to black, and then I guess fading to black, and then the
And
text
then
coming up.
yeah.
It's just such a like, it's so unsettling.
Yeah.
To me anyway, it's so effective.
It's pretty creepy. We didn't talk about a lot with music, but the Goldsmith soundtrack,
Oh, dude.
or the Goldsmith score is
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
And we did an episode on Legend, Labyrinth, and Neverending Story. Goldsmith did the director's cut
Yeah.
score, and
For Legend.
for Legend, and I know he did a lot of other film scores, and I don't know what they are, so we won't get into that too much. But I mean,
This is the only
just-
one he ever won an Oscar
Let's just
for,
say,
I think.
comparatively speaking, between okay, so he won an Oscar for this, and comparatively speaking, between Legend and the Omen, I mean, you've got one that stands out
As one of the
as
great-
part of
one of the great
why
scores
the
of all
movie
time.
is great
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
versus his director's cut version of the score as it compares to Tangerine Dream
Oh yeah, yeah,
in Legend,
right.
where you can make an argument that the Tangerine Dream score fits that film better.
Yeah,
And the cut of that film better, but yeah. So you're looking at something that's like just stands out in this movie.
right.
It makes every scene
Enhances
so
it.
much more creepy.
It enhances it so much.
I mean, even when any of Baylock's scenes, the scenes with her Rottweiler, when it comes to any of the kills, any of the times that Damien is influencing the world around him, when they go to the zoo and the animals are freaking out. I mean, just the way it builds up and becomes so extreme with the what would you call it, like a choir that's screaming into the it's very
like
choral.
Gregorian chanting.
Yeah, exactly, and it just adds to the creepiness of the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Even
It makes
the intro to isn't the first scene the screen crawl or like the credit the opening credits.
It's Damien's silhouette with the upside down
Perfect.
crucifix.
Yeah. And we could have gone into the way that when William Friedkin's name pops up on the screen, it has that like stabbing sound almost like.
yeah.
So I think all of these movies have excellent scores.
Yeah, they do.
But
But this one stands out.
Goldsmith,
The
like
score.
just that's excellent. I don't know if you have more on that.
No, I agree. It does everything a score should do. It enhances the pictures so much.
Yes.
I think, I mean, I know this is your, well, okay, let's talk about our first experiences with it. So I watched it when I was a little kid, probably 6 or 7. This is the one I've seen the most out of these by far. The thing that I always remember really well from it is the pictures. Like anytime I think about this movie,
those are
I think about
iconic,
the pictures and, you know, obviously the...
Which is also one of the corniest things about the entire movie, I think, as it compares to the other two.
It's gimmicky.
Exactly. It's like, okay, we have to like come up with some reason why, or some way that they can recognize who's going to die next. And then they did the whole, which at the time I think was a pretty original concept, but I don't know what movies have done it since where you have that like, oh, now we...
The Ring.
Okay.
And Final Destination.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like more like a Final Destination type of film. Where,
Right, which is kind of what this trilogy with the lowercase t became.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's a kill movie.
You know, we get a gem every now and then, but these were 3 that fell into at least a decade span of time. That 8 years, no, about 10 years span of time where you had 3 masterpieces come out. But anyway, so to me that was kind of like it's almost like shoehorned in terms of like creating a plot dynamic.
I think it makes it scary. But go ahead. I have reasons.
I mean, so it's a device for foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But it's so obvious. Where the foreshadowing in the other films are like so subsurface.
Sure.
Where this one is like, oh, okay, I'm developing these photos.
Right.
Oh, clearly we saw that Brendan was going to die. Now we know who's going to die next. It was, very like...
But by the time the photographer comes around, you like him so much because he's done. He has like this heroic kind of right to where the audience, even though he's not our main guy, we like him because he's done all this detective work.
Yeah,
he's an
he's like-
exposition machine.
He's like an
for
investigatory
Gregory Peck.
journalist.
Yeah. So by the time he's the one who makes the reveal, and then also he's, because we've been following him kind of lurk in the shadows for a while.
We realize that
he's gonna die.
Yeah,
like, fuck, I don't want that.
But that's
die.
also kind of corny in the sense that he's like, oh, and look at this one also. I took a photo of myself and there was a reflection in the background.
Yeah.
And he's like, and then it's like dun dun dun.
Yeah, true.
Like he's
There is
gonna,
a
he's
punchline.
gonna die too because he got a photo of himself having a line go across his neck, which ends up being an excellent horror film scene.
Yeah, and I think,
but it's just all like a little bit on the surface.
It is on the nose
in comparison to the other two films.
I agree.
So that's what.
I'm just trying to think of any missteps in terms of the pacing.
Well, I think we've only said bad things about this movie, and we love this movie. So
yeah,
what do you know?
I think it's just great. I think Gregory Peck, you root for him because it's great casting.
Okay.
Gregory Peck is. You trust him and you think he's a good guy.
Well, I
and he
think
is.
what the whole point of that is the storyline is really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the story is what's important about this movie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the insane action sequences and not even action, just the suspense and the build-ups to what happens and why people have their motives.
Right.
Plays into the storyline, but it's also executed perfectly. So that's always a thing where you have the storyline that's really good, and then you have these like massive jumps where something crazy happens.
Right.
That plays directly back into the storyline. And the storyline is, I mean, I don't want to do a synopsis on the whole film, but we're looking at a situation where you have a guy who basically was lied to by an entity that his son died, but they ended up killing him. His son, and they're like, we have this alternative baby we're going to give to you. He never tells his wife that he has the other baby in the mix. Yeah. And she starts to realize this other baby is not her baby, and he starts to do creepy things, and then go from there.
Right. And play it out as you would.
Yeah, and they do play it out as they would in that type of film. Yeah. Where it's clear that like this is the Antichrist and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well the movie does really cool little movie things with like the priest coming in, Father Brennan. Right?
It's Brennan, yeah.
Brennan, yeah. I think it does something that I guess The Exorcist did also, and maybe other movies did this too, but showing a priest who's so he's a harbinger. Like you've seen this kind of archetype has existed in a million different movies where it's like the guy who's like, don't go to the last house on. This doesn't happen in the last house.
No,
it's like don't go to the last house on the left. Or like don't go up the mountain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And he's basically that. But seeing a priest in this role,
you don't want to go down that route.
Yeah, right. It's
that guy. Yeah.
Right. He's basically that, and like you don't see weak priests that often. And now,
but he also what you're saying is he presses the narrative.
Yeah, well, he presses the narrative, but also it makes the movie even more unsettling to see a priest who's so regretful about his life. Because usually in movies you think of a priest as a guy who, even though Karras has his doubts, it's like
but
he's not like afraid.
That
Karras.
That's
Brennan
true, and Brennan is, but Brennan also was born with the mark of the beast as a birthmark.
So he was
so he's been fighting, but he's also fighting that to his last breath.
True.
Which makes him, maybe I didn't realize this before, a little bit more admirable, not versus Karras, I'm not going to compare the two, but more admirable than you might think he was because of the fact that at the end of the day, he tried to do the right thing to save his soul, even though he was already, they literally say it was a birthmark, like his 666 on his body was literally a birthmark. So
so he was literally predestined to serve the devil.
Was he in the hospital? Was that
they don't show him, but
he knows he was
there that night.
Oh, he says he was there that night. Okay.
But then he's not the priest who Gregory Peck gets the baby from the beginning.
But from the audience point of view, in terms of like it being like an investigation, I think that the Omen, you're in the seat and you're on the edge of your seat to figure out like what is Thorne, what's his name? the ambassador Thorne.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, but how Thorne is going to handle this situation, and you know that he's set up Robert Thorne. He's set up as almost like the hero archetype. He's like a guy who made a mistake, and he has to rectify the situation. And that character being driven in that way is very clearly set up as where this movie is going.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. It's ultimately kind of a classic Greek tragedy. Is you got somebody who was like in a super high, like a king or somebody who's in a really revered position, falling down to the depths, and he literally becomes a murderer of his own child, which maybe got covered up in the press because the president is at the funeral.
Oh yeah, it was.
But either way,
I mean, there's a grand plot going on with this one too. Actually, a grander plot than what's going on in Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, much grander. Yeah, right.
Which is another interesting distinction where there's no grand plot going on in The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. It's more
insular.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. But this one also, another thing that sets it apart, or at least makes it unique, is just that. The fact that the stakes are so much higher in this movie. The fact that he has so much more to lose. And that the family, the clock is ticking, he's an older guy.
Well, also, he learns that the entire world has so much more to lose.
Yes.
So, to that, almost hero dynamic, he has to... Which ultimately he fails, because the kid goes, "Daddy, no, don't kill me." Right.
It's his humanity that fucks him over, basically.
Yeah, he almost could have pulled it off, and then he gets shot by the police.
What else? But what else would you do in that? You couldn't stab a 5-year-old, no matter how much bogan he's telling you to. You wouldn't do it.
If he were a little bit more immersed in the idea that was happening for a little bit longer, and he could have sat back and plotted to do it.
Yeah.
But he was so thrown and thrust into the moment that he even says, right before I think it's Jennings is the reporter, the photographer, the photojournalist.
Yeah.
Right before he gets his decapitated.
Yeah.
He's like, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it myself.
Because Thorne throws his shit.
Thorne is saying, I can't kill a 5-year-old. I mean, I believe it's true, but I don't know if I believe it's true that much.
Right.
So he's already questioning it. The guy says he'll do it if he's not going to do it, and then he gets offed. So it's like he was you knew his character was questioning whether or not he could do it.
Yeah.
Which is a distinction between kind of Thorne and Karras, where Karras is questioning whether or not he can pull off what he's going to have to pull off to ultimately save the situation, and where Karras passes the test, Thorne fails and gets killed, and then the Antichrist is now left to run amok and do his bidding.
Yeah, that's something.
And that's how the movie is left.
There's something really interesting about that with the fact that Rosemary's Baby isn't as mission driven. There's something to be accomplished in The Exorcist and in The Omen. Kill this baby.
Yeah.
Find out what's going on, then kill the baby becomes the other mission. Exorcist's mission is obvious. The Rosemary's Baby, though, her mission is have the kid, but the movie remains engaging constantly, despite the fact that it doesn't not have a clear plot. You know what the plot is, but the stakes are smaller, but at the same time
they're questionable.
That makes them big, and they're questionable, but they're almost bigger because they're affecting her physically.
Yeah.
I think we touched on basically all of our bests so far. So best score, hands down, is it's The Omen. Incontestably, actually. I don't think you could objectively even make an argument that Rosemary's Baby touches.
I'm not going to, because I don't have an argument to make, but I do think there's an argument to be made.
What's the argument?
I'll leave it at that.
No, what do you think the argument would be, though?
I think they're equally as excellent in their execution of the score.
And they're belonging in the movie.
Exactly.
But I do think still, if I'm going to listen to Mia Farrow lullaby versus what Jerry Goldsmith did.
What Jerry Goldsmith... Okay, from that standpoint...
Yeah.
It's the iconic...
independent of the movies.
It's been parodied.
Rosemary's Baby wouldn't have been better if it had... actually, it might have been, if it had Jerry Goldsmith's score for this, but...
I don't think so. But, yes, to that point, I got you.
I also, for the record, I think... all of the shit in Rosemary's Baby is real. I was playing devil's advocate earlier. I was just making the argument that I thought could be made.
I like that argument.
For that case of it being more dreamy.
Mm-hmm.
Best ending, I still think The Omen wins there. Best character, actually, what do you think the best ending is?
What do I think the best ending is?
Yeah, or your favorite.
It's definitely not The Exorcist. That is one area where
I think it falls short there too.
Where we were just off camera debating, not debating even, but just real quick, kind of wrapping up what we thought our best movie was, and that's still questionable for me.
Yeah.
But The Exorcist it's I don't know if The Exorcist or The Omen, which one I can choose. But that being said, the ending of The Exorcist is
the weakest.
The weakest out of the three.
Yeah. I agree.
As we've talked about it before, I think that movie could have ended somewhere else.
Oh yeah, where do you think it could have ended?
It could have ended almost more on a cliffhanger, where it kind of wraps it up and puts a bow on it, and everybody ends in a happy way. That's not a happy movie. It doesn't fit the movie to me.
Yeah.
And when you had the end scene where Regan sees the priest and his collar, and she's looking at it, and you're almost questioning.
That feels dark. There's some dark.
You're wondering what's going on in her eyes, and this goes again to you brought up her performance as a child actor. I mean.
Yeah.
The way she's looking at the priest's collar and everything that's gone on that we know, you almost feel like the demon's still in there.
Right.
Then she just walks away happy, and Kinderman ends up talking to the priest at the end, and that's where that movie.
It's baggy.
I kind of wish it could have just ended on Karis jumping out of the window, and then we say, okay, we can interpret this movie. Now, for me to say that is ridiculous because it's a masterpiece, and to have my layman's critique on the movie in that sense, I'm not trying to go there.
Right.
But out of the three movies, it's the weakest.
It's the weakest ending.
Weakest ending as just a.
Yeah, it's baggy. And it's strange because I feel like Friedkin's movies, or at least the few that I've seen, they usually end on more of a high note. This one kind of it ends and it's an epilogue. The ending is an epilogue. It doesn't feel like the ending.
Was Sorcerer his next movie after? Mm-hmm. So he corrects that problem in Sorcerer.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally.
Pays off at the end.
Totally. Yeah.
And French Connection cuts off exactly where it needs to.
Exactly at the right point. Yeah. So that's where this movie fell short for me overall.
I think it almost needed that because it's so dark though. I think it almost required it.
I think you go that route in that movie that you got to ride it out though.
Keep it bleak. Yeah, I could see that. But at the same time, and I know it's a little Spielberg-y, but I don't mind that it has that because I think it is so dark with that fucking kid getting possessed.
It's a rough movie to watch.
Yeah.
There's some shit going on there.
Right. And the hero's dying, and
Yeah.
Chris is happy. That makes me happy because I like her. Although she is kind of an asshole, but I like that. It makes me like her more because she just is
overall a likable character.
Right.
Yeah. So my favorite ending, is that what the?
Yeah.
And so we have. I'm still gonna say Rosemary's Baby because I think the movie is stronger on a whole.
Yeah.
It's more complete. It's more in depth, and I think the payoff isn't there, but it doesn't need a payoff. It lends itself to having an open ending more so than The Omen. The Omen, again, speaks, even though it could, in a vacuum, exist and be an excellent ending and a very creepy ending.
Yeah.
I appreciate the character arc and the question of what Mia Farrow,
Rosemary.
What Rosemary ultimately will do in the end, and the fact that she does something that it's unexpected, but then you realize it makes so much sense for her character, I think is a perfect wrap up for her character.
Yeah.
Whereas, again, The Omen plays more as a kind of Hollywood type.
It's not as personal. Yeah. I think.
So for that reason, I'm gonna go.
Even though it's not the same ending, but it's similar in that it's open ended. And evil wins, basically.
And I like movies where the bad guy ends. I think that that subversion, the way they you're rooting so hard for a good thing to happen,
right? And
it doesn't deliver on that,
right?
I think is a positive for the film.
But also to just touch on the layer that it has there, The Omen, that's bad. You could almost that the ending is horrible for all characters involved.
And all of humanity.
And the world,
as a
right?
serious
And
film.
same thing with Rosemary's Baby, with the exception of Rosemary, because you're in her shoes the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost, even though I still think it's bad, I think she should have killed the fucking kid. But it's a more layered ending because she decides to submit.
Well, if it was a Hollywood movie, she would have maybe killed or attempted to kill the kid.
Yes, right.
She would have maybe gone the Robert Thorne route and like been killed trying to kill the child.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
by the cult.
Right.
Instead of by the quote unquote like good people.
Right.
So yeah, but it went the opposite direction, and
Right.
I think
It
that
works.
movie is just it so perfectly plays to what the importance of what Rosemary views as important is only the whole thing is about her and her baby, and the movie is literally called Rosemary's Baby.
Right.
So it plays perfectly. It's such a good like wrap up for what that movie is supposed to be.
Right.
And what happened in between was just a complete mindfuck and drives you through that entire movie.
Right.
I think that movie is the best.
To the point where
end.
it is the only logical ending to that movie too. She wouldn't have gone and killed this.
No,
kid.
it would have been completely illogical for her to go and do that.
And against her character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree.
So that's on endings. That's how I feel.
Okay, cool. Best character.
Best
Also
character?
Rosemary's Baby, maybe.
Well, I think I brought this up to you again off camera, but we can't not talk about Minnie Castevet.
Yeah.
What's her name? Ruth Gordon? Ruth?
I don't know.
Is that it?
I
Is
think
that
it
the
is.
actress's name?
Yeah.
She's excellent. Her like old lady, just being like a kind of busybody old lady.
Totally.
She kind of steals the show in a lot of
Yeah.
scenes where she's on camera.
Totally disarming presence, and well, even though she is constantly advancing on enemy territory, like she's constantly. She's constantly dominating the space she's in because of that busybody.
And on screen too, or like just her
physically dominating the space. That's what I mean. Yeah.
She's excellent.
But also in a disarming way because everybody knows that lady.
Yeah,
Everybody's had an old lady
she's like that kind of goofy old lady that you're like, okay, I can be friends with her, but only to a certain extent. I don't want her intruding on my life, and she like kind of weasels her way into being that old lady that's like up in your business, and you're just like, all right, lady, I'm trying to be polite to you, but you're taking it too far. But then as soon as she takes it too far, she finds a way to dial it back and make you feel like she's still that nice old lady.
Yes, and you would certainly never mistake somebody like that for being a cult member. Also, you would, because if I'm thinking about cult members, okay, yes, I think usually they're dumb, but at the same time, there's almost an intelligence that goes in being into a cult because there's a sign of like dedication to something. You know what I mean? Where like, she seems like she has a million hobbies. Like she doesn't seem like a lady who would dedicate her life to the devil.
But she is, and she
right.
has.
Well, that's what's so great about the characters. It disarms.
But even during the ritual scene, even during that scene, she like kind of steals the show in that scene in a comical way,
right?
Where
like, don't worry, it's not wearing off or whatever.
So Guy in that scene is literally like, I don't know. It seems like she's still awake.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't worry about it. Just keep chanting.
Yeah.
she just like has that like old like curmudgeonly lady, but also like kind of trying to be friendly, but just like, yeah, I think it's Ruth Gordon, and if I'm wrong, I'm mad I butchered that. But are you trying to get on camera, bro? We got a little dog here walking in.
Hey, doggy boy.
Anyway, so Ruth Gordon as Minnie Castevet is excellent. I think she's probably, in my opinion, the best performance in all of the movies.
I totally agree.
Even though we didn't even talk about her and her character, but I mean, there's so much to discuss with these movies.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you have?
No, I think Ruth Gordon. I think it's the best performance. I don't think it's the best character. I think the best character is probably
best character. I can.
You think she's the best character?
No, it's Karis.
Karis for you.
Yeah.
I would. I don't even remember what I've thought in the past with this question, but probably Chris O'Neill actually is my favorite character.
Chris McNeil.
Chris McNeil. Yeah, probably
Really?
Chris McNeil because she is an atheist and she goes against, and a lot of people who are
That's a good answer.
atheists usually, and I can't speak for all atheists, but I know a lot of if you're an atheist, you're that way, you don't believe in God for a reason. So to completely swallow her pride and buy into this, what she considers bullshit, I think is so admirable as a character. It shows what a great parent she is, and she has a lot to lose too. I mean, we mentioned how Gregory Peck, how his character in The Omen has a lot to lose, but she's she's a famous actress. And I think she's my favorite. Maybe not the strong. Yeah, she's pretty good. She's pretty strong.
Well, if you're gonna say she's the best character, I mean, in terms of how she deals with the situation, I'm trying to think like what stands out in terms of her actions. Like, what does she do that really catapults her into that? Like,
I think it's most strangely enough, dude. I think it's just giving a shit. I think a lot of parents would maybe not brush it under the rug.
Well, she had the option to put her child in an institution.
Yeah.
She said, "We're not doing
no.
that." We're
right.
Yeah, but also to go back to her faith, and how you said she's an atheist and like swallows her pride and jumps into which again plays into Karras and how he's affected by this and his faith. But to swallow her pride and go to a priest, she finally gets to a point with the doctors where they're beating around the bush, but they tell her that she needs to go see a quote-unquote exorcist.
Yeah.
And she says, "Are you telling me that I need to take my child to a witch doctor to keep her out of an institution at this point?" And they again won't answer that question, but they essentially say, yes, that's what you have to do. And she does it. She just like goes, "Okay, this is what I have to do." And she's beat up and bloodied and finally goes through a situation
I think she's just like the toughest. Like, she's the grittiest. And I like what Rosemary... I don't like what Rosemary goes through, but yes, it's very admirable.
Well, Rosemary goes through it.
She keeps her shit together.
Not only psychologically, but more or less psychologically.
Right.
Where Chris goes through it psychologically and physically.
Right.
So that's another distinction between what the two women go through.
Chris, she knows that she's facing something bad, where Rosemary isn't positive that she's facing something bad.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So
it's like easier for Chris to also latch on to like good versus like I'm on the right side of this, where Rosemary.
Well, I mean, Chris goes through all of the channels to disprove any of the fantastical.
Yeah.
Or not fantastical, but the just unbelievable, the spiritual side of it.
To your point, also, she has more agency than Rosemary. But also, she doesn't have a guy who's gaslighting her constantly. Maybe if her husband was around, I mean, we don't know. I mean, that's definitely a significant part of the story.
Yeah.
The idea of her being a single parent.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would definitely say Chris.
All right, cool. I think ultimately, Karras, Exorcist back up, dealing with his question of his faith. Makes I'm putting this in such a like corny way.
I mean,
to make him an interesting character. I mean, we've gone into so much depth about details of
I guess we did
character,
touch on Karras quite a bit. So what makes him a great character is, character redemption. Obviously, that's there. That's nice. Everybody likes a little bit of a redemption story. But also that he has such a good reason to be to be out of touch with his faith. And the fact that he not only dies, believing in God, but or at least getting back in touch with his faith, he also, saves somebody's life because of it.
Yeah.
Which basically fills in for the life that he couldn't save, which was his mom. Like, that makes him all the more interesting of a character. I don't really have any critiques on that. I mean, he's a great character.
I feel like my explanation of him is falling short because he's such an excellent character. There's so much going on with him.
Yeah.
And that pull between his faith and losing his faith is so important in the movie. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to wrap up how important that is to the final scenes of the movie. Not even the final, just every scene that he's in.
Yeah.
Is again. Like I said about the tug of war in the Rosemary's Baby, the audience as a viewer, you're being pulled into where he's going to go with his faith.
Yeah.
and ultimately at the end he might fail. Marin dies. I mean, Marin's the only priest that's been like exposed that they can find that's been exposed to such an insane situation, and then Karras ends up having to do it on his own, and he's already questioning his faith. So it just like kind of all plays into that.
Yeah, everything's working against it. That's true. He is the one who's dealing with the most formidable shit. Like, literally, I mean, yeah, okay, Robert Thorne has to kill the Antichrist, but at the same time, literally all he's doing is dragging a 5-year-old,
right?
And has to stab it. That's it. Rosemary's Baby. Oh, go ahead.
Just no, like Rosemary's Baby. Go ahead.
Well, Rosemary's Baby. She does have to deal with the
psychological
cult. But still, a bus ticket would get you a pretty long way if you're in that situation.
So what your point is, the most physical, the most
immediately
two priests literally
presence.
die being like having to deal with this demon.
And not only
exactly.
you can't. It's not like you can just go up and kill it. He has to psychologize, or I guess really he has to.
He has to psychologically.
He has to use his mind powers.
First of all, deal with himself and his own strength, and then be able to overcome that, and then have to deal with this insane entity that's I mean, just the cleverness of the devil incarnate.
And again, you can't go just stab the devil in the face and kill it. You have to get it out of an innocent being.
Because you're killing the child if you do that, which is what ultimately the devil wants to take this child.
Yeah, right. So, it'd be a win for him if you.
So I think that's a good wrap up for the entire thing.
So overall, your favorite movie of these three is what?
Now I'm questioning it because it's always been Rosemary's Baby, just for the simple fact that if you sit down and watch a movie from beginning to end and look at a movie and say this is a beautiful film, Rosemary's Baby hands down wins
as an art piece
without a question.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Now in terms of a thriller, I think you've got
The Omen,
The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of a most entertaining, watch beginning to end, you could sit down and have fun with the movie.
Popcorn movie, yeah.
A popcorn movie, yeah. I think you have the Omen. So my favorite, I still think, because of the way I feel about movies, is Rosemary's Baby. The fact that this is R-rated movies kind of makes me want to not say that, but as The Exorcist is the most R-rated movie, it still isn't jumping The Omen or the Rosemary's Baby.
So we agree. I think we've agreed on this before, but so Rosemary's Baby number 1, Exorcist number 2, Omen number 3, right?
Yeah, Rosemary, Exorcist, Omen. Yeah,
and I would go Exorcist, Rosemary, Omen, just for the simple fact that I think, it sounds dumb and counterintuitive, but I think The Exorcist in some ways is the tighter movie. Like, I think it's just, tight, like, it's the most fun to watch. Even though it's not engaging it's not as engaging as The Omen from, like, scene to scene to scene. In terms of, like, following a plot, I think it's just the most watchable. I love it.
Yeah, but so many movies are watchable.
Yeah, I know, but it's the most watchable, and it's the most emotionally engaging for me.
I would agree with that. And I think that has to do with Karras, and I think it's a good point that you brought up Chris McNeil as your favorite character, because that's another level of that I haven't normally looked at the movie through that lens, and that adds so much to it. Also, just the creepiness factor. I mean, I'm kind of being turned on this movie now, but I still think as a beautiful film, as if you could take a snapshot of the thing and make it what, I don't know if I'm putting this properly, but if you could literally just take a picture of it and experience it in one shot, I think if it all could get mashed into one black hole of a thing, I think Rosemary's Baby is the thing. It's the most complete, beautiful.
It knows where it's going. There's never a false note. It's formal, but not.
And it's flawless.
It's flawless. Yeah, it is flawless.
We haven't brought up a flaw with that movie, and I don't think you can. So for that reason, it's number one as a film. But you know, you have what's more fun, what's more watchable, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
that's the way I feel about that. Yeah.
Totally.
Anyway,
Cool, man.
I think
that's it.
we covered everything we want to cover. Yeah.
Yeah. I got nothing else.
Yeah, good. I don't want to have anything else. I'm ready to wrap this up.
Yeah.
My wine is done.
You have 2 minutes.
Perfect. So, do you want to talk about anything?
I don't think so. I think I had everything out of my
Do you want to talk about any things that you have coming up on the horizon, or
I mean,
is that a thing we're gonna do later?
yeah, let's hold
Or do you
off.
just feel weird about it?
No, I don't feel weird. I just want to hold off for now.
All right, sounds
Yeah.
good. So this has been R-Rated Films. Follow us on Spotify,
Spotify.
some other platforms. I don't know.
Probably
we
YouTube.
upload
If
on
you're watching
Anchor.
this, yeah, you're on YouTube.
If you're watching this
Hopefully,
now,
if you're
we're on
watching this.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the early stages of this, so please forgive this.
Maybe that should be the name of the podcast.
Please forgive this.
Please forgive this.
We could change the name. It's not over yet, but yeah, we don't have a YouTube channel yet.
Yeah.
Like especially, but
Hopefully you're watching this on YouTube though. Yeah.
That
So
would
do
be
hit
ideal.
hit all the buttons you're supposed to hit. We'll see you in the next one, or maybe there's a video already in the playlist.
also please comment and send feedback. I think
tell
that's
us if
important.
we
Like,
are good or we suck.
yeah, we want to know. We're not sensitive, so let it rip.
Yeah.
Am I asking for a problem?
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
don't think so.
All right, cool.
Just 100 comments on why my teeth are purple right now, probably.
I only have one glass of wine. I probably have purple teeth now. So.